The envelope arrived on Tuesday morning, cream-colored with elegant gold lettering. I should have known right then that my world was about to implode. Marcus held it in his hands like it was made of pure platinum, his eyes lighting up with an excitement I hadn't seen in months, not since we started planning our own wedding. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Jessica's getting married, he whispered, almost reverent. Jessica, his college sweetheart. The one who supposedly got away 7 years ago. Late. The one he claimed was ancient history, when we got engaged 18 months ago. That's nice, honey, I said, not looking up from my laptop where I was reviewing catering options for our ceremony next month. Send her our congratulations. But Marcus wasn't listening. He was already tearing open the invitation, and the way his face transformed as he read it made my stomach drop. Pure joy. The kind of joy I used to think was reserved for me. Maya, you don't understand. She's getting married on September 15th. September 15th. Our wedding date. The date we'd booked a year ago. The date printed on 200 invitations already sent. The date my parents had flown in from Portland to help celebrate. So, I tried to keep my voice steady, but I could feel the ground shifting beneath me. I have to be there. He looked at me like I was being completely unreasonable. Jessica was my first love. This is huge. I need to see her get married. The words hung in the air between us like a toxic cloud. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, the laugh, the just kidding that never came. Marcus, that's our wedding day. I know, but Maya, you have to understand. This is Jessica we're talking about. She specifically invited me. Look, we thrust the invitation at me, pointing to handwritten script at the bottom. Marcus, it would mean the world to me if you were there. Jay, I read those words 3 times before they truly sank in. His ex-girlfriend had the audacity to invite my fiancé to her wedding on our wedding day, and he was acting like this was perfectly normal. Are you hearing yourself right now? My voice cracked, despite my efforts to stay composed. You want to go to your ex's wedding instead of marrying me? Not instead of, he said quickly, running his hands through his dark hair the way he always did when he was trying to work out a problem. We could postpone. Just by a week or 2. Jessica's wedding is in Napa Valley, Maya. It's going to be incredible. The whole college crew will be there. I haven't seen some of these people in years. Postpone. Like our wedding was a dentist appointment that could be rescheduled. Like the months of planning, the deposits, the arrangements. The emotional investment meant nothing compared to watching his ex-girlfriend marry someone else. You're serious? It wasn't a question. Could see it in his eyes, in the way he was already mentally packing for California. Come with me, he said suddenly, as if this brilliant compromise had just occurred to him. We can make it a long weekend. You'll love Jessica once you meet her. She's amazing. And her fiancé, David, is in tech too, just like me. We'll have so much to talk about. The sheer tone deafness of it all left me speechless. He wanted me to accompany him to his ex's wedding, to smile and make small talk, while he relived his glory days. I want to watch him celebrate another woman's happiness, while our own relationship crumbled in real time.
Oh.
The word came out harder than I intended. Absolutely not. His face fell. Maya, please be reasonable. This is important to me. And our wedding isn't? That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said. I stood up from the kitchen table, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. You're asking me to postpone our wedding so you can attend your ex's. How is that not saying their wedding is more important than ours? You're being dramatic. Dramatic. The word every woman has heard when she dares to have feelings about being disrespected. I felt something cold and final settle in my chest. Fine, I said quietly. Go to Jessica's wedding. His face brightened immediately. Really? Maya, thank you. You won't regret this. I'll make it up to you, I promise. We can have it even better. Wedding when we reschedule. I didn't say we were rescheduling. The confusion that crossed his features would have been comical under different circumstances. What do you mean? I mean, you can go to Jessica's wedding, and I'll have our wedding as planned, without you. The silence that followed my declaration stretched so long, I wondered if Marcus had heard me correctly. He stood there in our kitchen, the same kitchen, where we'd shared countless morning coffees and late-night conversations about our future, holding that damned invitation like it was his lifeline. "You can't be serious," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. But I was serious, dead serious. And for the first time in months, I felt completely clear about something. The fog of wedding planning, stress, and relationship compromise lifted, and I could see our situation with startling clarity. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Maya, listen to yourself. You can't just have a wedding without the groom. That's not how this works. Why not? Everything's already paid for. The venue, the flowers, the photographer. My family's already made their travel arrangements. Your family too, actually. Seems like the only person who doesn't want to show up is you. I watched realization dawn on his face as he began to understand I wasn't bluffing. This wasn't one of our usual arguments where I'd eventually cave to keep the peace. Something fundamental had shifted. This is insane. You're talking about ending our engagement over one wedding. No, Marcus. I'm talking about ending our engagement because you think watching your ex-girlfriend get married is more important than marrying me. There's a difference. He set the invitation down on the counter with exaggerated care, like it was an explosive device. Okay, let's think about this rationally. Jessica and I dated for 3 years in college. She was a huge part of my life. Okay. Wanting to see her happy doesn't mean I don't want to marry you. Then prove it. Marry me like we planned. It's not that simple. Actually, it is. We stood across from each other in the kitchen, the same island where we'd once laid out wedding magazines, debated floral arrangements, and celebrated. With my favorite Thai takeout just last week, back when I believed we were solid. Jessica means a lot to me, Maya. She always will. If that's something you can't accept, maybe we're not as right for each other as we thought. It felt like a punch. In just one sentence, he'd managed to undermine everything we'd built while painting himself as the rational one. It was classic Marcus, manipulative in a way I was only now beginning to recognize. "You're right," I said evenly. "We're not compatible." A real partner wouldn't ask me to delay our wedding so they could attend their exes. Some relationships are meant to stay in the past. "That's rich," he shot back. "Coming from someone who still meets up with her ex Tom every few months." Tom and I have a professional connection. I don't put him ahead of you, I don't idolize him, and I certainly wouldn't skip our wedding for his. Marcus opened his mouth to argue, but stopped himself. Instead, he picked up Jessica's invitation again, staring at it like it might offer some profound answer. "Look," he finally said, slipping into that patronizing tone he used when explaining tech to his parents. "You're overwhelmed. Planning a wedding is stressful. But if you think about this, logically Jessica only gets married once. We can reschedule ours." The arrogance was stunning. Not only was he reducing my feelings to stress-induced irrationality, but he was also assuming Jessica's wedding was more sacred than ours, like ours was just a dress rehearsal. "How do you know this is her only wedding?" I asked sweetly. "Statistically, she's got a 50-50th shot. Maybe you can make a habit of attending them all?" "Don't be cruel, Maya. That's not like you." Cruel. One of his favorite words, always ready to use it whenever I didn't roll over and accommodate his selfishness. I was cruel for wanting him to pull back on the gaming marathons. Cruel for suggesting midnight texts to old coworkers. Weren't appropriate. Cruel for wanting a fair share of the chores. But now, I was starting to connect the dots. You know what's really not like me, Marcus? Being with someone who treats me like a second choice. That's not fair, isn't it? You light up when you talk about Jessica. You remember everything about your time with her, but forgot our anniversary last month. You'd rather celebrate her new beginning than ours. He fell silent. For a moment, I thought he might actually see what he was doing. But then he looked at me, those eyes I used to love, and I saw not regret or understanding, but bitterness. I can't change. How I feel about her, Jessica, was my first real love. That doesn't mean I don't love you. But she'll always be important to me. If that's a problem for you, maybe we shouldn't get married. There it was. The truth, finally said aloud. I was never his first choice, just the woman who stuck around while he emotionally stayed. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Tangled up in the past, Jessica had clearly moved on, but Marcus hadn't. Okay, I said. Okay, what? Okay, we won't get married. You're right. His face went pale. He'd expected another fight, more compromise, more of me trying to convince him I was enough. He hadn't expected me to be done. Maya, wait. Let's not make a rash decision. We can fix this. But I was already walking toward our bedroom, where my wedding dress still hung from 2 weeks ago. The one I'd shown him while he stared at his phone and muttered a distracted, "You look nice." This isn't rash, I said over my shoulder. This is clarity. Go to Jessica's wedding. Marcus. Have a great time. But when you come back, I won't be here. I heard him follow me, footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor we'd picked out together. The apartment we'd filled with memories now just felt like a box of empty promises. You're making a mistake, he said as I pulled down my suitcase. No, I replied. The mistake was believing you were ready to be someone's husband. You're not. You're still chasing a fantasy from college. She invited me to her wedding. That says something. I paused, staring at him. Yes, Marcus. It says she's happy, moved on, and mature enough to be kind. You're the one who hasn't let go? You're treating her invitation like a secret message, but it's just an invitation. He didn't argue because deep down he knew I was right. I began folding clothes, and for the first time in months, I felt relief. That anxious knot in my stomach, the one I'd blamed on wedding planning, was finally unraveling. Where will you go? He asked, voice low. To my sister's, for now. After that, I looked at him, really looked trying. To remember the man I once loved before he became just someone I used to know. After that, I'll build a life with someone who doesn't need to be convinced I'm worth choosing. The words lingered, marking the end. I zipped my suitcase, rolled it toward the door, and walked past him, past the man I thought I'd marry, past the invitation that ended everything. As I reached the door, he called out one last time. Maya, please, don't do this. I love you. I turned to face him. I know you do, Marcus. But you've always loved her more. And with that truth finally out in the open, I left. Wine or whiskey? She asked, not even bothering with pleasantries. Both. 20 minutes later, I was curled up on her oversized sectional, glass of red wine in one hand, and the full story spilling out of me like water through a broken... Damn, Carolyn listened without interruption, her dark eyes growing more incredulous with each detail. Let me get this straight, she said when I finally finished. Your fiancé wants to postpone your wedding to attend his ex's wedding, which happens to be on the exact same day, and he thinks this is reasonable. He thinks I'm being dramatic for having feelings about it. Dramatic. Carolyn sat down, her wine glass with enough force to make me wince. Maya, honey, dramatic would be showing up to Jessica's wedding in your own wedding dress. This is called having self-respect. I laughed despite myself, the first genuine laugh I'd had all day. God, can you imagine? Just walking down the aisle behind her like some deranged backup bride. Don't give me ideas. I'm already planning 17 different ways to ruin Marcus's life. Carolyn tucked her legs under herself, settling in for what I recognized as one of her legendary plotting sessions. Tell me more about this Jessica person. What's her deal? Honestly, don't know much about her. Marcus gets this weird, nostalgic look whenever her name comes up, but he's always been vague about the details. College sweethearts, dated for 3 years. She moved to California for some job opportunity, and they did the long-distance thing for a while before eventually breaking up. Amicably, according to Marcus? Yes. According to Marcus, everything about their relationship was perfect except for the geography. Caroline raised an eyebrow. And you never found that suspicious? The perfect ex-girlfriend who got away? I thought I was being mature by not probing too deeply into his past relationships. I figured if it was important, he'd tell me. I took another sip of wine, feeling foolish. Besides, she's been out of the picture for years. She lives 3,000 miles away. Never saw her as a threat to our relationship. Famous last words. The thing is, Carolyn, I don't even think she is a threat. Not really. I think the threat is Marcus's complete inability to live in the present. He's so obsessed with this romanticized version of his past that he can't fully commit to his future. Our future, Caroline corrected gently. My future, I said firmly. There is no hour anymore. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the city lights twinkling through the massive windows. I felt emotionally drained, but oddly clear-headed, like emerging from a fever and finally thinking straight again. So what's the plan? Caroline asked. Besides camping out on my couch indefinitely, which you're welcome to do. I honestly don't know. I've been so focused on wedding planning for the past year that I feel like I've lost track of who I am outside of being Marcus's fiancé. What do I want? Where do I want to live? What makes me happy that has nothing to do with him? Well, for starters, you can stop referring to yourself in past tense. You're still you, Maya. You're just finally free to remember who that is. Her words hit me harder than I expected. When had I started defining myself entirely through my relationship with Marcus? When had my identity become so wrapped up in being someone's future wife that I'd forgotten I was a complete person on my own? My phone buzzed on the coffee table. Marcus's name flashed on the screen, along with a text message. Can we please talk about this rationally? I'm willing to compromise. Caroline peered over my shoulder and snorted. Compromise. Now he wants to compromise. Let me guess. He'll graciously agree to attend Jessica's wedding for just the ceremony and skip the reception. How did you know? Because men like Marcus think compromise means getting 90% of what they want instead of 100%. I stared at the text message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. 6 hours ago, I might have jumped at the chance to find middle ground. Now, the very idea exhausted me. I'm not responding, I said, setting the phone face down on the table. Good. Let him sit with the consequences of his choices for a while. Caroline, can I ask you something? When David proposed last year, how did you know he was the right person? My sister's face softened at the mention of her fiancé. They'd gotten engaged 6 months after Marcus and I had, but somehow their relationship seemed decades more mature than ours. It wasn't any single moment, she said thoughtfully. But I guess what convinced me was how he made space for me in his life. Not just physical space, but emotional space. He didn't try to squeeze me into the leftover corners of his world, actively reshaped his world to include me. Marcus never did that. No, he didn't, and that's not necessarily his fault. Maya, some people just aren't ready for that level of partnership. But it's definitely not your job to wait around hoping he'll figure it out. We ordered Thai food and spent the evening dissecting every red flag I'd rationalized away over the past 3 years. The way Marcus always seemed slightly disappointed that I wasn't more like his ex-girlfriends. The way he'd casually mention things Jessica used to do, always with that wistful tone that made me feel like I was failing some invisible test. The way our conversations always seemed to circle back to his needs, his career, his feelings. You know what's really messed up? I said around midnight when we'd moved on to ice cream and increasingly honest observations. I don't think I even like him that much anymore. I've been so focused on making our relationship work that I stopped, noticing whether it was actually making me happy. And was it? It's making you happy? I considered the question seriously, trying to remember the last time I'd felt genuinely content in Marcus's presence, instead of anxious about whether I was meeting his expectations. No, I was comfortable, and I mistook that for happiness. Was so afraid of being alone that I convinced myself settling was the same as choosing. Well, congratulations. Now you get to find out what actually choosing looks like. The next morning, I woke up on Caroline's couch, 2:17 missed. Calls from Marcus and a series of increasingly frantic text messages. The progression was almost comedic in its predictability. First came the reasonable appeals to my logic, then the promises to reconsider Jessica's wedding, then the accusations that I was being childish and manipulative, finally the desperate declarations of love and pleas for another chance. I read through them all with a kind of detached fascination. This was Marcus in crisis mode, pulling out every emotional manipulation tactic in his arsenal. 6 months ago, these messages would have had me running back to him, convinced that his pain proved his love. Now I could see them for what they really were, the desperate flailing of someone who'd never learned to take no for an answer. Caroline appeared with coffee and croissants from the bakery downstairs, took one look at my phone and shook her head. The audacity of men never ceases to amaze me. He spends 3 years taking you for granted, prioritizes his ex over you, and now he's shocked that you won't stick around for more of the same treatment. I keep thinking about something he said yesterday. He told me that if I couldn't accept his feelings for Jessica, maybe we weren't compatible. Like my basic need for respect and prioritization was some kind of character flaw. That's because he's been conditioning you to believe that having standards makes you difficult. It's psychological warfare disguised as a relationship. I spent the day fielding concerned calls from my parents, my friends, and Marcus's family members who'd somehow gotten wind of our split. The conversations followed a predictable pattern. Shock, concern, gentle suggestions that maybe I was overreacting. Subtle pressure to work things out before the wedding became a total loss. "It's just cold feet," my mother said during our third conversation of the day. "Everyone gets them before a big wedding. Maybe you should talk to a counselor together." "Mom, cold feet is being nervous about the ceremony. This is my fiancé. Telling me his ex-girlfriend is more important than I am?" "But honey, they were together for years. It's natural that he'd want to see her happy. At the expense of his own wedding?" The line went quiet for a moment. "Well, when you put it like that, that's exactly how it is, Mom. There's no other way to put it." By evening, I was emotionally drained from explaining and re-explaining my decision to leave Marcus. It seemed like everyone in my life was more invested in preserving my relationship than I was. The constant pressure to reconsider was starting to make me doubt myself, a familiar feeling that I now recognized as one of the worst aspects of dating. "Marcus, I was heating up leftover Thai food when Carolyn came home from work with an expression I couldn't quite read. Interesting day?" I asked. "You could say that. I ran into someone you might remember from college, Emma Richardson." The name took me a moment to place. Jessica's younger sister? The one who was always hanging around campus? That's the one, except she's not hanging around campus anymore. She's a successful architect now, and she's gorgeous. She's apparently been living in the city for the past 2 years. I frowned, not understanding why Caroline looked so pleased with herself. "Okay, Maya, she remembers you. Very fondly, actually. Apparently you were one of the few people who was ever nice to her when she was just the annoying little sister. Tagging along to college parties? She was sweet. Felt bad for her, always trying to keep up with Jessica and her friends. They could be pretty brutal to her. Well, she's definitely not the awkward little sister anymore. And get this, she's single. Recently single, actually. Broke up with some finance guy a few months ago because, and I quote, he was more interested in the idea of me than the reality of me." I stared at my sister, finally understanding the direction of her thoughts. "Caroline, no. Absolutely not. Why not? She's beautiful, she's successful, she's available, and she has a very personal understanding of how self-absorbed her sister can be. Plus, imagine the look on Marcus's face when he finds out you're dating Jessica's little sister." "I'm not. Looking for revenge, Caroline? I'm looking for peace." "Who says it has to be revenge? Maybe it's just the universe providing you with exactly what you need right when you need it." I turned back to the microwave, trying to ignore the little spark of curiosity Caroline's words had ignited. Emma Richardson. I remembered her as a quiet, observant teenager with striking green eyes and a dry sense of humor that most people missed because they never bothered to listen. She'd had a massive crush on one of Marcus's fraternity brothers, I recalled, though nothing had ever come of it. How did this even come up in conversation? "She asked about you, actually. Said she'd heard through the grapevine that you were getting married soon and wanted to know if you were happy. When I told her what happened with Marcus, she got this look on her face." "What kind of look?" "The kind of look that said she wasn't surprised, and she had opinions about it." "Good opinions. Opinions that align very closely with yours, as it turns out." My phone buzzed again. Another message from Marcus, this one a screenshot of flights to California with a note. "See? I can book a red-eye Sunday night and be back. In time for our Monday morning meeting with the florist. We can make this work, Maya. Please, call me." I showed the message to Carolyn, who rolled her eyes so hard I was surprised she didn't strain something. "He still doesn't get it. thinks this is about logistics instead of respect. Caroline, about Emma. What about her? Not ready to date anyone. Just ended a 3-year relationship yesterday. I need time to figure out who I am when I'm not trying to be the perfect girlfriend. I'm not suggesting you elope with her, Maya. I'm suggesting you have coffee with an old friend who happens to understand exactly what you're going through. What's the harm in that? I looked at my phone again, at Marcus's desperate attempts to negotiate. His way back into my good graces without actually addressing the fundamental problem with his priorities. Then I thought about Emma, the quiet girl who'd grown into a successful woman who'd recently ended her own relationship with someone who couldn't see her clearly. Maybe Caroline was right. Maybe the universe was providing exactly what I needed, not a rebound or a revenge plot, but simply a reminder that there were people in the world who understood the difference between being loved and being truly seen. Okay, I said finally. Coffee. Just coffee. Caroline's grin was triumphant. I already have her number. The coffee shop Caroline had chosen was one of those deliberately hipster places with mismatched furniture, and baristas who looked like they'd stepped out of an indie film. I arrived 10 minutes early, partly out of nervousness, and partly because I had nowhere else to be. My entire schedule had been wedding-centric for so long that I was discovering vast stretches of free time I'd forgotten existed. I ordered a lavender latte and claimed a corner table, trying not to check my reflection in my phone camera every 30 seconds. It had been almost a decade since I'd seen Emma Richardson, and I had no idea what to expect. The last clear memory I had of her was from some end-of-semester party where she'd sat quietly in the corner, sketching architectural details in the margins of a notebook while everyone else got progressively more intoxicated. When she walked through the door at exactly 3 o'clock, I almost didn't recognize her. Caroline had been right about the transformation. The awkward teenager with frizzy hair and oversized clothes had evolved into a stunning woman with sleek auburn waves and the kind of understated elegance that spoke of genuine confidence rather than performance. She spotted me immediately and approached with a warm smile that transported me back to those college parties where we'd ended up talking in corners while everyone else played drinking games. Maya Chen, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. You look exactly the same, liar, but I'll take it. I gestured toward the counter. Coffee. It's the least I can do for ambushing you with my drama. Caroline didn't ambush me. I asked about you, remember? Emma stood up smoothly. And yes, coffee would be great. Americano. Black. While she ordered, I studied her profile, trying to reconcile this poised professional with the girl I remembered. She moved with the kind of quiet authority that suggested she was used to being the smartest person in the room, but had learned not to make others uncomfortable about it. So, she said, settling back into her chair with her steaming mug, Caroline tells me you're having an interesting week. I laughed, surprised by how easily she could make light of what felt like the worst disaster of my adult life. That's one way to put it. How much did she tell you? The basic facts. Your fiancé prioritizes his ex-girlfriend. You finally had enough. And now you're questioning everything you thought you knew about love and commitment. Emma took a sip of her coffee and studied me over the rim. Did I miss anything important? Just the part where I'm apparently the only person in my life who thinks this is a reasonable response to the situation. Everyone keeps telling me I'm overreacting. Are they? Emma's tone was carefully neutral, but I caught something sharp in her green eyes. Overreacting, I mean. I honestly don't know anymore. 3 days ago, I would have said no. Absolutely. Not. But after 48 hours of people telling me that relationships require compromise, and maybe I should be more understanding of Marcus's history with Jessica, I'm starting to wonder if I'm the crazy one. Emma set down her mug with deliberate precision. Maya, can I ask you something without you taking it the wrong way? Sure. Do you actually want to marry Marcus, or do you just want to be married? The question hit me like a physical blow, partly because it was so direct, and partly because I wasn't sure I could answer it honestly. I thought I wanted to marry Marcus specifically, I said slowly. But now I'm wondering if I was just so invested in the idea of our relationship working that I stopped paying attention to whether it actually was working. That's not the same thing as being crazy. That's just being human. We all get attached to our own narratives sometimes. What about you? I asked, deflecting slightly. Carolyn mentioned you recently ended a relationship too. Emma's smile turned rueful. 2 months ago, 3-year relationship with a guy who checked all the boxes on paper but never quite saw me as a real person. The idea of dating an architect than he was with me as an individual kept trying to mold me into his fantasy of what a creative professional should be like. That sounds familiar. I thought it might. The details are different, but the fundamental problem is the same. Some people fall in love with concepts rather than individuals. They pick partners who fit their narrative rather than partners who challenge them to grow. I stared at her, struck by how precisely she'd articulated something I'd been struggling to understand about my relationship with Marcus. You've given this a lot of thought. I've had a lot of therapy, Emma said, with a self-deprecating laugh. Turns out growing up as Jessica Richardson's little sister requires some professional unpacking. Was it that bad? Not bad exactly. Just complicated. Jessica has always been the golden child. Beautiful, popular, successful, effortlessly charming. I spent most of my adolescence either trying to be like her or trying to prove I was. Nothing like her. Neither approach was particularly healthy. I remembered the dynamic between the Richardson sisters. The way Jessica would introduce Emma as her baby sister, even when the age gap was only 3 years. The way Jessica's friends would tolerate Emma's presence without actually including her in conversations. I always thought you handled it well. You seemed so self-possessed, even as a teenager. I was dying inside most of the time, Emma admitted, but thank you for saying that. You were actually one of the few people who treated me like I was. Worth talking to rather than just Jessica's annoying shadow. You were never annoying. You were the only person at those parties having interesting conversations. About architecture and urban planning. At college parties, it was definitely annoying. You were passionate about something meaningful. That's not annoying. That's attractive. The word slipped out before I could stop it, and I felt heat rise. In my cheeks, Emma raised an eyebrow, but her smile was knowing rather than uncomfortable. Careful, Maya. Keep talking like that, and people will think you're flirting with me. Maybe I am. The admission surprised us both. I hadn't planned. To say it, hadn't even fully acknowledged I was thinking it, but there it was, hanging in the air between us like a challenge. In that case, Emma said after a moment, I should probably mention that I've been hoping Caroline would give me your number for the past 6 months. 6 months? I saw you at that gallery opening in Soho last winter. We're there with Marcus, and I almost came over to say hello, but you looked so unhappy that I didn't want to intrude. I asked Carolyn about you the next week, and she said you were going through wedding planning stress. I tried to remember the gallery opening she was talking about. It came back to me in uncomfortable detail. Marcus had complained the entire evening about the pretentious art and boring conversation, making me feel guilty for dragging him to something I'd been excited about. We'd left early, and I'd spent the car ride home apologizing for wasting his time. I was unhappy, I said quietly. I just didn't realize how unhappy until this week. For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice. Anyone who would prioritize an ex over their fiancé isn't ready to be married. Have you talked to Jessica about the wedding? I asked, suddenly curious about the other side of this. Story Emma's expression tightened slightly. We're not exactly close. Haven't been for years. But yes, she mentioned that she'd invited Marcus and was excited to see him again. She didn't mention that it was on the same day as your wedding. Would she have cared if she'd known? Honestly, probably not. Jessica has always been remarkably self-centered, even by normal standards. She sees other people as supporting characters in her story rather than protagonists of their own lives. The idea that her wedding might complicate someone else's plans literally wouldn't occur to her. That's harsh, but accurate. Look, I love my sister, but I'm not blind to her faults. She collects admirers like trophies and never thinks about the emotional toll on the people orbiting around her. Marcus is just the latest in a long line of men who've never quite gotten over her. Do you think he ever will? Emma considered the question seriously. It's not while she's still giving him attention. No. Jessica has a talent for keeping people just interested enough to stay hooked. She probably has no idea she's doing it, but that doesn't make it less destructive. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of shared understanding settling between us. I found myself studying Emma's hands as she traced patterns on the wooden table, admiring the graceful way she moved, the quiet confidence in her gestures. "Can I confess something?" I said impulsively. "Please do. I think I've been attracted to you since college, but I was too committed to the idea of being straight to acknowledge it." Emma's smile was brilliant. "It's funny, because I think I've been attracted to you since college, but I was too convinced. You were completely out of my league to do anything about it." "Out of your league, Emma? You're stunning and brilliant and accomplished. I'm the one who spent 3 years settling for someone who treated me like a consolation prize. You're also kind and intelligent and brave enough to walk away from a bad situation instead of making excuses for it. That's incredibly attractive." I felt something shift in my chest, a loosening of tension I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt seen. It's not as someone's girlfriend or fiancé or wedding accessory, but as myself, independent and complete. "Emma," I said carefully, "I should probably mention that I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing right now. I've never dated a woman. I just ended a long-term relationship 2 days ago, and my entire life plan just imploded. I'm probably not the best romantic prospect at the moment." "Good thing I'm not looking for romance right now," Emma replied. "I'm looking for connection, honest conversation, maybe some really excellent makeout sessions with someone who sees me clearly." I nearly choked on my coffee. That's quite a pitch. I'm an architect. I believe in clear specifications. In that case, I should mention that I'm temporarily homeless and emotionally fragile and have 17 missed calls from my ex-fiancé, who's apparently having some kind of breakdown about losing me now that someone else might want me. Even better, I love a project. We both laughed, and I felt something I'd almost forgotten existed. Possibility. Not the suffocating inevitability of my relationship with Marcus, where every day felt like another step down a predetermined path, but the electric potential of something genuinely unknown. "So what happens now?" I asked. "Now we finish our coffee, and then I show you the building I'm designing across town. After that, maybe dinner somewhere Marcus definitely wouldn't take you, and then we see what develops." "That sounds perfect." Emma stood up and extended her hand to me. "Come on, Maya-chen. Let's go build something new." I took her hand and let her pull me to my feet, marveling at how natural the contact felt, how right it seemed to be touching her. As we walked out of the coffee shop together, I caught a glimpse of our reflection in the window and hardly recognized myself. For the first time in years, I looked genuinely happy. My phone buzzed with another message from Marcus, but I didn't even glance at it. Whatever desperate plea or manipulation tactic he was trying now felt completely irrelevant. I was too busy, focusing on the woman beside me, on the warmth of her hand in mine, on the thrilling uncertainty of whatever came next. Behind us, the coffee shop faded into the background, along with everything else that belonged to my old life. Ahead of us stretched the city, full of possibilities I'd never imagined. 3 weeks had passed since my coffee date with Emma, and they'd been the most revelatory weeks of my adult life. We'd spent nearly every evening together, exploring the city like tourists in our own lives, talking about everything from sustainable architecture to childhood dreams to the peculiar psychology of people who collect vintage postcards. Emma had shown me her latest project, a community center designed around principles of healing and connection. And I'd found myself genuinely excited about someone else's work for the first time in years. More surprisingly, she'd listened to me talk about my own career and marketing strategy with the kind of focused attention that made me remember why I'd chosen the field in the first place. With Marcus, my job had always been background noise, something that paid the bills while we planned our future together. Emma asked questions that made me think deeper about consumer psychology and brand storytelling, treating my expertise as if it actually mattered. We hadn't slept together yet, though the tension was building to an almost unbearable level. Emma seemed to understand instinctively that I needed to move slowly, to discover this new part of myself without pressure or expectations. But the way she looked at me across restaurant tables, the casual touches that lingered just a beat too long, the goodnight kisses that left me breathless and wondering what I'd been doing with my life up until now, all of it was building toward something inevitable. I was getting dressed for another evening with Emma when my phone rang. Marcus's name flashed on the screen, and for the first time in days I answered, "Maya." His voice sounded hoarse, exhausted. "Thank God you picked up. What do you want, Marcus?" "I'm at the airport. My flight to San Francisco leaves in 2 hours." I sank onto Caroline's couch, suddenly understanding why he was calling. "You're really going. I have to." Jessica called yesterday, crying. Apparently her fiancé is having second thoughts about the wedding. She needs me there, Maya. She needs someone who cares about her. The audacity was breathtaking. Even now, even after everything that had happened between us, he was still choosing Jessica's emotional needs over any consideration for me. "Marcus, do you hear yourself? Your ex-girlfriend calls crying, and you immediately book a flight too. Comfort her on what was supposed to be our wedding day. Do you understand how insane that sounds? It's not insane to help a friend in crisis. A friend. Is that what you call someone you're willing to destroy your relationship for?" There was a long pause. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, more vulnerable. "Maya, I've been thinking a lot these past few weeks. About us, about Jessica, about what I really want. What conclusion did you reach? I think I've been in love with the idea of Jessica for so long that I forgot to fall in love with the reality of you. That's not fair to either of us." The admission should have felt like vindication, but instead it just made me tired. "So you're flying to California to what? Declare your feelings for a woman who's about to marry someone else?" "I don't know. Maybe I just know I can't move forward with anyone until I figure this out once and for all." Marcus, she's getting married tomorrow to someone else. Don't you think that's your answer? Her fiancé is having cold feet. The wedding might not happen. I closed my eyes, finally understanding the full scope of his delusion. He wasn't flying to California to support a friend in crisis. He was flying there hoping to swoop in and save the day, to finally win the girl who'd been his obsession for almost a decade. "I hope it works out exactly how you think it will," I said quietly. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I hope you get everything you think you want, Marcus." "I really do, 'cause that's the only way you're going to understand what you've actually lost." "Maya, wait, I didn't call to hurt you. I called because I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. You deserve better than someone who can't give you his whole heart. You deserve someone who chooses you first, every single time. Yes, I do. Maybe when I get back, after I've sorted all this out, we can talk. Really talk about starting over." I looked around Caroline's loft, thinking about Emma waiting for me at the restaurant downtown, about the life I was building that had nothing to do with him or his inability to live in the present. "No, Marcus, we can't. Maya, please. Don't make any permanent decisions while you're angry." "I'm not angry anymore. I'm grateful. You've given me the greatest gift imaginable." "What gift?" "You've shown me exactly what I don't want in a partner. And more importantly, you freed me to find what I do want." "What does that mean?" "It means goodbye, Marcus. Have a safe flight." I hung up before he could respond and immediately called Emma. "Change of plans," I said when she answered. "How do you feel about crashing a wedding?" 2 hours later, we were in Emma's car heading toward the venue Marcus and I had booked for our reception. I'd called the coordinator earlier in the week to see if we could use the space for a different kind of celebration. She'd been surprisingly accommodating, especially when I explained that I wanted to host a party for everyone who'd planned to attend my wedding, to thank them for their support during a difficult time. "Are you sure about this?" Emma asked. As we pulled into the parking lot, "It's not too late to just go home and order takeout." I've never been more sure of anything. The venue looked exactly as I'd imagined it would for my wedding, with string lights draped between the trees, and elegant table settings that caught the golden hour sunlight. But instead of a celebration of my relationship with Marcus, this was something entirely different. A celebration of my freedom, my growth, my courage to choose something better. Caroline had helped me organize everything, reaching out to friends and family members to explain the situation and invite them to what we were calling a new beginnings party. The response had been overwhelming. Apparently, more people had been concerned about my relationship with Marcus than I'd realized. Maya. My mother appeared at my elbow, looking radiant in the dress she'd bought for my wedding. "Sweetheart, you look absolutely glowing." "Thanks, Mom. I feel good. You must be Emma." My mother turned her warm smile toward my date. "Caroline's told us so much about you." I watched Emma charm my parents with the same effortless grace she brought to everything else. answering their questions about her work and her family with just enough detail to satisfy their curiosity without overwhelming them. She fit seamlessly into the group, contributing to conversations without dominating them, making everyone feel heard and valued. "She's wonderful," my father murmured in my ear during a quiet moment. "Much better than Marcus." "Dad, you liked Marcus." "I tolerated Marcus because you seemed happy. But you weren't really happy, were you? Not the way you are now." Looked across the garden to where Emma was deep in conversation with my college roommate about sustainable building materials, her face animated with genuine enthusiasm. She caught my eye and winked, and I felt that now familiar flutter in my chest. "No," I admitted. "I wasn't really happy." "Well, you are now. That's what matters." As the evening progressed, I found myself marveling at how different this felt from any event I'd ever attended with Marcus. Instead of spending the night managing his mood and making sure he was comfortable, I was free to actually enjoy the celebration. Emma made friends with everyone she met, from my grandmother to Caroline's boyfriend to my old boss, treating each conversation as an opportunity to learn something new. Around 10 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown California number. My heart sank as I realized it was probably Marcus, texting from Jessica's phone or someone else's. But when I opened the message, I was surprised to see it was from Jessica herself. "Maya, this is Jessica Richardson. I just wanted you to know that Marcus showed up at my wedding today, and I had to have security escort him out. I had no idea he was supposed to be marrying you today. I'm so sorry he put us both in this position. I hope you're doing something wonderful to celebrate without him." I stared at the message, processing the implications. Marcus had actually done it. He'd flown to California, crashed his ex-girlfriend's wedding, and apparently made such a scene that he'd been thrown out. By security? Everything okay? Emma appeared beside me, concern evident in her voice. I showed her the text message. She read it twice, then looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. "How do you feel about that?" she asked carefully, relieved mostly, and vindicated. "And incredibly grateful that I'm here with you instead of trying to manage that disaster." "Good answer. Emma, can I ask you something?" "Anything? When you see me, what do you see?" She considered the question seriously, studying my face in the soft light from the string lamps overhead. "I see someone who's brave enough to start over when most people would just settle for good enough. I see someone who asks thoughtful questions and listens to the answers. I see someone who makes me want to be better without making me feel like I'm not already enough." Tears prickled at my eyes. "That's the most beautiful thing anyone's ever said to me. It's just the truth. Marcus never saw me that clearly. I don't think he ever really saw me at all. His loss." Emma stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something subtle and sophisticated that suited her perfectly. "Maya, I need to tell you something." "What?" "I'm falling in love with you. I know it's fast. I know it's complicated. I know you're just figuring things out. But I wanted you to know." The words should have terrified me. 3 weeks ago, they would have sent me running. But standing there in the garden, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about my happiness, looking into the eyes of someone who saw me clearly and chose me anyway, I felt nothing but joy. "I'm falling in love with you too," I whispered. Emma's smile was radiant. Yeah, completely, hopelessly, happily in love with you." She kissed me then, soft and sweet and full of promise, and I felt something click into place that I hadn't even realized was broken. This was what it felt like to be chosen, to be valued, to be seen and appreciated for exactly who you were. Around us, the party continued, but for that moment, it felt like the entire world had narrowed to just the two of us and the infinite possibility stretching out ahead. When we finally broke apart, Emma rested her forehead against mine. "So what? Happens now? Now we go home together. And tomorrow, we start building something amazing." I liked the sound of that. As we gathered our things and said our goodbyes, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Marcus, this one from his own number. "Maya, I made a terrible mistake. Jessica doesn't want me. She never did. I threw away the best thing in my life for a fantasy. Please, Can we talk when I get home? I showed the message to Emma, who shook her head in disbelief. What are you going to say? I deleted the message without responding. Nothing. There's nothing left to say. We walked to the car hand in hand, leaving the venue and everything it represented behind us. In the distance, I could hear the sound of traffic and sirens and all the beautiful chaos of the city. Somewhere out there, Marcus was probably sitting, in an airport or on a plane, finally confronting the reality of his choices. But that was his journey to make. Mine was just beginning, and I was exactly where I belonged. 6 months later, I was standing in the kitchen of the apartment Emma and I had found together, sun-drenched space in Brooklyn with exposed brick walls and windows that overlooked a community garden. I was making coffee for two, a morning ritual that still felt miraculous in its simplicity. No walking on eggshells, no managing someone else's mood, just quiet companionship and the promise of another day spent with someone who genuinely enjoyed my company. Emma emerged from the bedroom wearing one of my oversized sweaters and paint-stained jeans. Her hair pulled back in a messy bun that somehow made her look even more beautiful than when she was dressed for client meetings. The community center. Proposal got approved, she announced, waving her laptop triumphantly. Full funding, timeline approved, everything. I set down my coffee mug and wrapped her in a hug that lifted her off the ground. Emma, that's incredible. I'm so proud of you. We celebrate tonight. That new wine bar you've been wanting to try. It's a date. The word still sent a little thrill through me. Dating Emma had been nothing like my relationship with Marcus. Marcus had made me feel like I was constantly auditioning for the role of girlfriend. Emma made me feel like I was exactly where I belonged. She laughed at my terrible jokes, encouraged my career ambitions, and treated every day we spent together like a gift rather than an obligation. My phone rang, interrupting the moment. Caroline's name flashed on the screen, and I answered with a grin. Please tell me you're calling with wedding planning disasters? I need the entertainment. Actually, I'm calling with gossip, the good kind. Caroline's voice was practically vibrating with excitement. You're never going to believe who I just ran into at the farmer's market. Enlighten me, Marcus. And he looked rough, Maya, like really rough. Apparently he's been staying with his brother since he got back from California because he couldn't afford the apartment rent on his own. I felt a flicker of something. That might have been sympathy, quickly replaced by complete indifference. That's unfortunate. Wait, it gets better. He asked about you. Specifically, he asked if you were dating anyone and whether you might be willing to have coffee with him to discuss closure and moving forward. Emma raised an eyebrow from across the kitchen, clearly listening to the conversation with amusement. What did you tell him? I told him you were blissfully happy with someone who actually deserves you, and that seeking closure was something he should discuss with his therapist, not his ex. Fiancé. Caroline Richardson, I love you. I know, but wait. There's more. Apparently Jessica's marriage lasted exactly 3 months. David filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, which in rich person speak means she was probably cheating on him. I processed this information with a sort of detached curiosity. A year ago, news about Jessica's marriage would have felt personally significant, tied up in my own feelings about Marcus and their history together. Now it felt like gossip about strangers. That's unfortunate for her, I said honestly. Not really my concern anymore. You've really moved on, haven't you? I looked at Emma, who was now reading something on her laptop, with the kind of focused concentration that meant she was already mentally designing her next project. Sunlight caught the auburn highlights in her hair, and she absently reached for her coffee, without looking up from the screen, completely comfortable in our shared space. Completely, I said. I can't even remember why I thought Marcus and I were compatible. After Caroline hung up, Emma looked at me with a questioning expression. Fiancé's update. Apparently he's having a rough time adjusting to the consequences of his choices. Caroline says he wants closure. How generous of him to finally consider your emotional needs. Only 6 months too late. Emma closed her laptop and came to sit beside me at our small dining table. Does it bother you, knowing he's struggling? I considered the question seriously, not in the way I would have expected. I don't take any pleasure in his pain, but I also don't feel responsible for fixing it. He made his choices. Now he gets to live with them. That's very mature of you. I had a good teacher. I leaned over to kiss her cheek. You've shown me what it looks like to be with someone who actually wants to be with me, not just someone who's afraid to be alone. Speaking of which, Emma said, suddenly looking nervous in a way that was completely unlike her usual composed confidence. I have something for you. She pulled a small wrapped box from her jacket pocket and placed it on the table between us. My heart stopped. For a moment, as I stared at the unmistakably ring-sized package. Emma, what is this? Open it and see. Inside the box was not an engagement ring, but something even more meaningful. A delicate silver necklace with a small architectural pendant, a tiny replica of the community center she'd been designing. It's beautiful, I whispered, genuinely touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. I wanted you to have something that represents new beginnings, she said softly. And also, I wanted you to carry a piece of my work with you, since you've been such an important part of the process. Emma, I love it. I love you. I love you too. More than I thought it was possible to love someone. As she fastened the necklace around my throat, I felt a completeness I'd never experienced with Marcus. This wasn't the desperate clinging of two people afraid to be alone. This was the joyful choice of two whole people deciding to build something together. Later that evening, as we sat at the wine bar toasting Emma's success, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me check. Maya, this is Marcus. I know I have no right to contact you, but I wanted you to know that I understand now what I lost. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I was too stupid to realize it. I'm in therapy, working on myself, trying to become the kind of person who could deserve someone like you. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that you were right about everything. I hope you're happy. I showed the message to Emma, who read it with a neutral expression. How does that make you feel? She asked. Grateful, I said, surprising myself with the honesty of the answer. Grateful that I was strong enough to walk away when I did. Grateful that his inability to choose me led me to you. Grateful that I learned the difference between being wanted and being truly valued. Are you going to respond? I looked at the message again, then deleted it without replying. There's nothing I need to say to him. The life I'm living now. Is response enough? Emma raised her wine glass. To new beginnings and better choices. To finding exactly what we didn't know we were looking for. We clinked glasses, and I felt a surge of pure happiness. The kind that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Outside the restaurant windows, the city hummed with life and possibility. Somewhere out there, Marcus was, probably still trying to figure out who he was without the fantasy of Jessica to sustain him. Somewhere else. Jessica was learning that her charm and beauty couldn't solve the fundamental emptiness that drove her to collect admirers. But their stories were no longer connected to mine. I had found something real, something healthy, something that grew stronger every day instead of requiring constant maintenance and compromise. I had found someone who saw me clearly and chose me gladly, someone who made me want to be better while loving me exactly as I was. As we walked home through the tree-lined streets of our neighborhood, Emma's hand warm in mine, I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago. So desperate to make the wrong relationship work that I'd nearly missed the chance at the right one. So afraid of being alone that I'd almost settled for being undervalued. That woman felt like a stranger now. This version of myself, confident and clear about what I wanted, willing to take risks for genuine happiness rather than safe for comfortable misery, was who I'd been meant to be all along. Sometimes the best thing someone can do for you is choose someone else. It leaves you free to discover what you actually deserve. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. This one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.